So we waited 2 minutes. I will start with a little bit of intro and technical announcement so everyone knows how this webinar works. In the meantime, I know that some more people will arrive and then we will start the real discussion. So hello all, good morning. I'm Melinda Miklós, the CEO of WeAreOpen, and we have here today 4 amazing guests. You will hear from them pretty soon. I would like to give you a little bit of intro. So what you see now, it's WeAreOpen's Open Backstage event series. We started this series last year with the intention to have in-depth discussion about different aspects of diversity and inclusion connected to the workplaces in some ways. And today we will look at what companies or employers can do to support transgender and intersex people, and our guests today will help us understand this better. So how this Open Backstage webinar works technically, you will see that if you look at this bar below the video, you will see there we have a Q&A box. That will be your place where you can ask questions from us. And I would like to encourage you all to ask questions whenever you feel like. We will monitor this box during the entire discussion. So we will try to address all the questions that may come up. If you don't understand something that we like a definition, if you need a definition for a word, or if you have any more in-depth question, if you would like to have more explanation about something, please do not hesitate to ask them. There is no wrong question. So the intention today is to make sure that we can give as clear picture about this current situation of transgender and intersex people in Hungary as possible. So please do not hesitate to use the Q&A box. Also, you will have the opportunity to upvote others' questions in the Q&A box. So if you have the same question, you don't have to write it again. You just go to the question that someone else has already posted and upvote it. So we will see that more people are interested in the answer to that question. What you would also experience, we will have what is called in Zoom polls. So we would love to hear about you as well, and we would love to hear your opinion. So it would happen from time to time, not too often, maybe 2-3 times during the entire discussion, that a poll jumps up or pops up, and we will ask you to just vote for the relevant answer. It will be simple and quick. Yes, I believe this is it. One more thing that I wanted to mention, as you probably noticed, Adel Onodi is not with us today. She apologizes. Something unexpected came up, and unfortunately she couldn't make joining us today. So she is very sorry for that, and I hope that you understand this as well. Okay, so this is about the technical information, and now let's get started. Can I ask all of you to quickly introduce yourself? Can we go around the table? I'm very, very pleased to be able to discuss with you today.
We should start.
Go ahead, Ivett, then.
Okay. Who asks? All right. So I'm Ivett Ördög. I'm a transgender woman. I've been a software engineer for the last about 10 to 15 years, depending on where we start counting. And I transitioned about, 1.5 years ago, approximately. And I've been already working at a company at the time and went through the transition period at that company since I left there and switched to another job. And I am also very active in transgender activism, or in more general in human rights activism. I believe that it doesn't make sense to have just one kind of activism. I only believe in an intersectional view of all minorities and organizing our activism around that. And but of course, my primary focus is transgender and intersex issues. And I was one of the co-organizers of the first Budapest Trans Pride.
Thank you, Ivett. Go ahead, Bea. I see you almost started talking.
We're both Beas, and I wanted to say for Bea Bodrogi, but then it's me now. My name is Bea Sándor, and I work for Háttér Society, an LGBTQI organization operating for the last 25 years. We are getting older and older. It's an LGBTQI organization providing services for the community, and I really mean that all members of the various communities that we serve. And we also provide trainings and work on research and advocacy. I work in the legal program of Háttér, both providing legal aid and conducting research and advocacy projects.
Thank you. And Bea Bodrogi?
My turn. I'm Bea Bodrogi. I'm a human rights lawyer working for Transvanilla. I also work for other NGOs on different fields, on discrimination, anti-discrimination, media law, media expression, freedom of expression. But in this capacity, I represent Transvanilla, which is a community-based NGO working from 2007. And the key activities of Transvanilla are community building, counseling, online, offline, providing legal aid, doing monitoring, discrimination monitoring, doing researches. And I'm involved in the legal aid program. I represent 23 transgender people before the European Court of Human Rights. Because of the lack of legal gender recognition, I suppose we will talk about it shortly. And I also represent trans people in Hungarian courts as well. This is in brief.
Thank you. And yes, I'm Melinda Miklós, the CEO of WeAreOpen, and WeAreOpen is the community of more than 1,000 organizations, companies, and non-profit organizations as well in Hungary. And our mission is to show it to millions of people that openness is a value for organizations, and to help employers and employees to experience, learn, and showcase the benefits of inclusion. So we organize campaigns, and we organize a range of services that supports employers when they would like to create a more open internal environment. And yes, as Bea, you have already mentioned, we have an apropos to talk about, to sit here together today. Yes, the inclusion of transgender and intersex people has been an issue in Hungary before as well, but now there is a recent development with this so-called 33rd paragraph that would make it impossible for transgender people to have their gender legally recognized. So to start understand what we talk about really, can I ask you all to help us understand where the situation was before and what has changed since this law went into practice, and what has changed, especially when we focus on the work-related scenarios?
Can I start with the short legal background? Actually, the present and the new law prohibits the legal gender recognition, and the new law requires the gender mark registered at birth certificate, and accordingly, trans people cannot have their documents amended to match their gender identity. So basically, this is the present situation in Hungary, which is absolutely in contrast to international human rights standard, because the legal gender recognition should be part of the right to privacy, right to self-identification. This situation hasn't been before. Actually, 2018 is the turning point, because in 2018, the Hungarian government suspended all legal gender procedures present in Hungary. which means that for 2018, there was a practice basically based on partly on law, but partly on practice that made possible for trans and intersex people to change their name and their gender legally. And in 2018, as I mentioned, the government suspended all procedures. They provided different reasons, but one of the reasons was that because of the new GDPR regulations and provisions, they cannot keep and handle private and sensitive data. And they also said that they are working on a new regulation. So that was basically the message from the government towards trans community and trans and intersex people. And everybody waited. We hoped that the new regulation would be in line with international human rights standards, under which I mean that the legal gender recognition regulation should be quick, should be based on a quick, transparent and accessible procedure. So basically this is it, where we are stand now. And Transvanilla and other organizations are working to challenge this. I always say that this is a long marathon. We have initiated several procedures before international and national courts, and just waiting for their results. And we really hope that this might change, but not in the near future.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I ask you, any of you, to help with understanding the definitions that we may use today? So what does intersex mean? What does transgender mean? And all the other definitions that you consider important to be able to have this in-depth discussion.
Okay, so actually I can do that part. Just to start with, in general, transgender and intersex people are people who are diverging from the gender binary in some way that most of society expects. And there are different phrases going around, so let's go into some of them. Let's start with intersex people, because that's a very easy to define group. These are people who are born with ambiguous genitalia, basically, or have ambiguous sex, biological sex in other ways, like they might have chromosomes that are not XX or XY, or they might have XY chromosomes but miss the gene that encodes the part that matters for turning into a male. So there are females who have XY chromosomes, yet they are fully developed females. And also like hormonal things can count as intersex conditions. So in general, whoever has a condition, and this is usually considered a medical condition, that makes that person diverge from the biological binary sex, that's called intersex. And for intersex people, this new law is problematic because the doctor has to decide within 7 days which box to tick, and then after that they cannot change that, even though at the age of 7 days it's a toss of a coin. You might look at someone and make a decision, but as they grow up, it might turn out that their gender identity is different from what was guessed. And this is important that in this case it's a guess, not a fact, as the law states. Then there is another term called transgender. Transgender people are those who are not intersex, or well, could be intersex, but those whose gender identity or gender representation differs from the gender assigned at birth. So, and this has two main groups. or three, basically. One is cross-dressers or transvestites, depending on which country you are in. It depends which counts as a politically correct term. But these are people who just dress differently occasionally. So that's a very different group from transsexuals who change their appearance indefinitely and live as the other gender, that the gender that doesn't match their gender assigned at birth. And then there is a third group which could be dissected even further. These are non-binary people. Those are whose gender identity is not one or the other. It could be neither. It could be they both feel like so they don't identify with either gender, or they identify with both, or in some cases they just fluctuate between the two genders. And for gender non-conforming, that is basically an umbrella term for different forms of mainly used for non-binary people, but also sometimes for transsexuals and transvestites. So these are the basic terms. One other term that we usually use a lot is transition, and this is mostly important in connection to binary trans people who at some point in their life decide that they are going to transition into the other gender and change their appearance and their behavior and their name and all of that. And transition is composes of three parts. One is social transition, legal transition, and medical transition. And these three don't have to be done at once, or some people don't even do all. Social transition is just starting to live as the other gender. Legal transition is the one that currently is not possible in Hungary, where you change your the gender marker on your documents and also your name. It's important that in Hungary, you can only choose a name that matches your gender, and the list for the two genders has no intersection. So there are no genderless names as in other countries. And the third thing is the medical transition, which is not that, which is basically, again, a very broad term. There are several aspects to it. It could be hormonal treatment or different surgical procedures. And these are all currently usually covered by the trans person. There used to be some sort of 10% funding from the government, but that's with only if you already had already good transition, which we couldn't have in the last 2 years anyway. So basically, it's usually covered by the person themselves, all of the costs, which can be prohibitive. This is what we are talking about is millions and forints. So it's not an easy feat to go through if someone wants to go through medical transition. Did I leave something out?
I don't think so at the moment, but if something comes up, I will pay attention and ask you again if I hear something that we haven't explained yet in this discussion. Okay, so thank you for this intro to this topic, and can I jump to asking you about what we would like to achieve today is to understand basically how employers can support transgender and intersex people in this current situation. And I think to be able to do that, we have to look at several things. So the first would be maybe what is it that transgender and intersex people experience in everyday lives? Like what are some very, very tangible examples that we could think of? Like, yeah, oh, okay, this is a situation where a support of an employer should really be there. And then we could look at the certain processes that employers can go through when they would like to create the inclusive environment for trans and intersex people. So let's start with some practical information, some tangible examples about what are the situations where the support is really needed, or where or what you experience, especially because of the changes in the law.
We have very first-hand experience right now because we have been for the last 1 week, last couple of weeks in search of clients to start our way in somehow achieving that the new legislation that basically prohibits legal gender recognition or makes it completely impossible in Hungary, hopefully will be somehow destroyed and repealed, and a new legislation should be accepted that makes legal gender recognition possible. So in our search for clients, we are interviewing lots of people who have applied to start on the different legal procedural ways that we have come up with. And we really meet all kinds of people in order to know whether they can actually participate in the legal procedures, or where they live, whether they can travel to Budapest or major cities, or in the different regions of the country. And also because the current procedures are also relevant. In the current procedures, it is also relevant whether birth certificate was registered or made. We have to ask them about their birthplace and work obligations, and we really meet all kinds of people. Of course, we have already, we have had trainings at different workplaces, and we have always had clients at the legal aid service. It's just that it's a bigger number. And they really work just everywhere at multinational companies, offices, plants and factories, all spheres of the employment possibilities that's all in Hungary. And they do talk about their everyday experiences, of course, or the people who have turned to a legal aid service ever since, not only 2018, since legal gender recognition is very problematic or completely impossible most of the time. It has been, it's really their everyday lives, their lives at work. And apart from work, there's also, one would not even think about how often we have to present our IDs. Just when we travel in a train, or go to a post office to get a letter that was sent to us. So we basically, everyone all the time have to present their IDs on various occasions, and it's really very uncomfortable. It makes life very difficult if your gender identity does not match what is signed there on your identification card. And it's the same at work. It really counts for a trans employee, whether they are called and referred to, whether the gender identity, that actually lived and deeply felt gender identity is respected and accepted by all at work. It's of course it is expressed by what names they can use, what names their colleagues use when talking to them, or what names they are forced to use with clients, or what name they can use with their clients, and in their everyday work.
So you say that basically every situation when a name should be presented and when it should be supported by an ID document, all of these situations in life became very uncomfortable, and even sometimes like it can be even dangerous in some scenarios, I would imagine, to be involved in this not being recognized based on your identity.
Yeah, actually, I couldn't name and think of any fields of the life in which people are not affected. So yeah, like beside employment, the healthcare, school, family matters. Actually, every part of the life is affected just because of this. So I think the lack of legal gender recognition brings really lots of issues up. But in terms of employment relations, I think there are basically two main fields which is affected is the recruitment process and the employment. Within the employment, there might be discrimination or other issues. So I think maybe it's worth focusing on both on the recruitment process or separately on recruitment processes and also those issues that come up within the employment issues.
Mm-hmm. Can we go through these processes and give some very practical tips to employers? Like, let's start with really like recruiting and trying to show to people that you are a welcoming place for transgender and intersex people, and also make sure that the recruitment process is safe for them. So because in the recruitment process you also have to prove your identity. So how to do this? How to do this properly? Can you give some tips here?
Yeah, so I can grab this one because I've been trying to get a job not so long ago, and one of the things that I think is useful is masking the gender identity from at least the employees, because like HR is gonna know. It's impossible. Although my CV has my real name, I already am Ivett Ördög on LinkedIn and on my CV, but I have to come out fairly early on, and because of that, like it's really important to make sure that at least those who are interviewing for someone for their technical skills are not aware of the situation, because like that, even if people are really nice and are accepting, it still introduces subconscious negative thoughts, or I don't know, so prejudices. And I think that it's really important to try to make sure that as few people are aware of the situation as possible. And even like once someone is hired, I think it's a really important move to make it possible for that person to use their real name in the office, not their official name. And I think like as far as and trans inclusive workplace goes, I think there are basically 3 levels of how helpful you can be in this situation. The first level is like trying to make sure that you hire someone even though they are trans, and try to make sure that the processes are fair. That's like something that most companies probably go to, this level of helpfulness. I think the second and the second level is like making sure that that person, even if that person is outed in some way, won't face discrimination anyway. And for that, it's late to start working on that once you have a trans employee, because like someone is there already, it's really hard to quickly get people to understand the situation, understand what it means for someone to be trans. So I think that right now every company should focus on, since until now most trans people weren't visible. Most trans people decided to go stealth, move to a different city even, and just not tell anyone about their status. Now it's changing because of this law and because of the last 2 years. Now we cannot cannot make sure that people don't know that we are trans. So because of that, it's fairly important to get this topic into the people's minds and make them understand why this is important, why they should care, and how they should react to trans people. And for binary trans people, it's enough that you try to forget that they are trans, essentially. For non-binary people, it's a little different. I don't have much experience with that because I'm binary, but it's also an interesting topic, how you make sure that people are can treat non-binary people the way they should be treated. And yeah, and the third level, I think, is where you are actively helping the trans community in this situation, because right now our basic human rights are being violated, as Bea said. And to be honest, we basically have two options right now. One is to wait it out and see if the courts rule in our favor, and if they rule in our favor, what is the government going to do? Are they going to respect that or not? We have already seen situations where the Hungarian government didn't respect the court order. So honestly, this is like not sure that it's gonna work. We have a good chance, but we don't know yet, and it's gonna take years. The other option a trans person has right now is moving abroad. And because of that, I think it's really important to see if a company can help in moving for their employees, especially international companies who have offices in other countries. That could be a really helpful option for their employees. But yeah, so that's a kind of tough situation, because like the countries where you can get legal gender recognition without citizenship are Ireland, England, and Germany, all of which are more expensive to live in. So that means that you not only have to make sure that that person officially works in Germany, for example, but you also have to make sure that they have the means to live there, to have the same standard of living, which means raising their, effectively raising their pay grade, which I know is cost. But like this is the highest level of help that the company can do right now. And yeah, probably it's like one of the examples that I thought of this morning is I'm sure many of you have seen the movie Schindler's List, where this guy was helping Jewish people even though it hurt his business, and then people made movies about it. So I think this is different situation, because right now trans people are safe from being exterminated. For now, let's hope it stays like that. But still, it's a strong violation of our human rights, and helping the community that way is, I think, would go really far.
I would like to build on what you said, that many transgender people who were not visible until now, they are now forced to be visible. And I would imagine that it would mean that, yes, some would consider moving to another country, but some may not have the opportunity to do so. So I imagine many of them, and by them I know that there are two numbers that usually comes up, saying like people between it's like between 3,000 and 30,000 people that we are talking about now, yeah. Right? So a good proportion of them, it can happen that they are now looking for a new job somewhere where they can feel themselves being really safe. Mm. And while we were discussing, we ran a little poll here asking our audience what are they the most interested in. And the number one was how companies can maybe cooperate to support transgender people. And then the second was that, yes, how can like practical tips that they can use when they would like to support transgender and intersex people. So I would like to just stop here a little bit and say it again what you said, Ivett, that maybe many of you that who are listening to us now don't have a transgender or intersex colleague at the moment, but it's the time to really start working on having one and working on creating the environment that would be welcoming if someone arrives, because Ivett, you said that it's late to start certain processes when somebody is already in the company, because you have to,
if that person is transitioning there. Because like if someone is coming in, it's much easier because you just don't have to tell people. But in my case, when I was transitioning at the company, I had no option to not come out, since they have known me for 6 years. And then in that situation, it's important that the company or the employees are already up to date on this, because back then when I was transitioning, I told the HR person about 3 or 4 months ahead that we are going to have this, and she did start working on it, but like the 3 or 4 months just wasn't enough to make sure that I don't face any discrimination within the office. So yep.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
So yeah, that's very important to start working on this now. And one of the things that's interesting is that for a company that has about 200 employees, once I calculated the probability of having at least one trans person out of the 200 is larger than having none, right? So if you have a company of 200 employees, chances are there is at least one trans person there. And if it's a company of say 1,000, you're probably having several trans persons, and you might not even know that. So this is something to pay attention to.
May I just comment on this? I think one of the good tools how to find out do we have a trans person or trans people? Do we have trans people in the community or in the employment place? One of the ways to find it out is anonymous staff surveys. This proved already effective. I mean, anonymous staff surveys a good way of measuring job satisfaction, as well as identifying potential issues which may arise. And as an employer, you can ask questions about identities. You know, if it's anonymous, then people tend to answer to these questions, and this has been has proved effective in big companies. So this is one of the ways how to handle this and how to find out. But going back to the bigger picture, I think it's not that complicated to manage trans employees, but I think one of the keys, one of the main key is the whole approach that the employer or the company should have an approach to deal trans and intersex issues with a bigger picture, as we mentioned, including the recruitment procedure, and to deal issues like discrimination, harassment, or how to deal with the basic and simple issues, how to change IDs, how to deal with contracts which doesn't match, the names in the contract and the names in the ID. So these are lots of practical issues.
How to do that? Sorry for interrupting you, because you mentioned like thinking about how to do this, and I'm asking you actually how to do this, because it might not be so intuitive.
No, yeah. Well, I would start with the recruitment procedure, to talk about the recruitment procedure, which again, I think anonymous application forms should be provided, and you know, the key is that the main focus should be on the competencies and skills required for the job rather than the personal characteristics. But at the same time, we know that, you know, personal data will be required after, you know, in some stage of the recruitment procedure. But the very beginning, it's not relevant. What is relevant is the competencies and skills, and a separate sheet could be devoted for personal data. I think this is how to start with, to start anonymously. This is what we experienced effective.
Yeah, and also as for making sure that companies are seen as trans friendly, there are a couple of things that you can do in terms of like employer branding. You can actually mention that you are trans friendly. You can just say that, and that's already like goes a long way, because it's gonna drive away some workforce who is not accepting, who is not open, and probably you don't want that anyway. And at the same time, it's gonna bring in people who are trans or are supportive of trans people. Now the important part though is to make sure that this is not just pinkwashing, because in many cases it happens that a company says that they are trans friendly or gay friendly or whatever, and then in their practices that doesn't show, and that's a problem. So if you are saying you are trans friendly, take it seriously. And even just consult with one of the organizations down there. Háttér and Transvanilla are good organizations to consult with, but like make sure that you're not just saying it, because that obviously can ruin your reputation in general as well.
Yes,
I would emphasize.
I wanted to go to you just before that. I wanted to ask one or advanced sentence is that yes, we see that many companies are, so for many companies this is also a learning curve, of course, like learning and how to become really a trans inclusive or LGBTQ inclusive environment. And I wanted to go to you, Bea, and ask what Háttér Society experience when a company maybe consults with you about the process that they are developing.
Yes, we have consulted both by companies and also through the legal aid service questions and experiences come in from trans employees too. And I just wanted to connect to what Ivett has said about coming out, and that there are trans employees, even if not known at many companies. We do have that experience. So I would emphasize that recently, partly perhaps because of the legal difficulties ever since 2018, and partly due to the great job that organizations do with community organizations, trans organizations like Transvanilla and Prisma, and organizations or groups formed online that can give support to their members. More and more trans people come out. So we have more and more questions from companies on different methodologies and what to do. And but of course, research shows that most trans people are not out. So if we compare the results from research done during the last 10 years, we can see that while only 1/3 of LGBT people, lesbians, gays, bisexuals, are completely not out at work. It's when we ask, or if we take the data separately for trans people, it's 75%. So of course there are many companies that have trans employees who do not even know about that. But I would really emphasize that more and more people come out. So they are now facing the questions, and they have various questions, and we do provide advice and consultation on what the senior management can do to support diversity and inclusion in general and anti-harassment policies. Why policies are important to be really inclusive and also known to the employees and used by the employees. policies on anti-discrimination and anti-harassment, and different tools where they can report in anonymously. And also, as Bea Bodrogi has told, internal surveys to measure both content and contentedness and loyalty and experiences, harassment experiences at work. More and more companies work closer with LGBT and allies groups, employee groups, which we have been consulted by a few of these ally groups who felt the need to focus more on trans and intersex employees during the last couple of years. And it's very important to train human resources staff and to train basically all employees, especially if transition is going on. And when there is an employee who is in the process of transitioning, then all sorts of legal and also human resources related questions come up regarding data protection, when this should be and how this should be announced and discussed with all colleagues, who should be consulted, how senior management or at least upper level management can express support, when the IDs or internal papers, internal name tags and email addresses are changed, and how it is discussed with colleagues, or it's not only the name, but the use of dress codes at a company, gender expression using the changing rooms and locker rooms and bathrooms. So there's a lot to think about, but when a company steps into this, it's really something that they can really, in this way, they can really effectively show that they are in for this, they are in for diversity and inclusion. And it does help the whole atmosphere, the whole environment, and does show to all the workers belonging to different minority groups or different groups that they do care, and that they can do very practical and rational steps to keep their workers there and enhance loyalty.
Yeah, so can I add a few things here? One of the things that we were talking about is asking the gender identity of your employees. And I want to give a very important tip here. Don't just ask if you are transgender, for two reasons. One, some people are not even aware of themselves yet, are still on the way towards recognizing themselves as trans. They are not going to answer, I'm transgender, when asked. The second reason is because some trans people, once they transitioned, don't call themselves trans anymore. Although this is not correct in terms of the definition, a lot of trans people just leave it aside and say they are not trans anymore. They are transitioned, and that's it. So one tip that I heard and so worked very well is to ask it in a kind of backwards manner. And one of the favorite questions I've seen is, did you ever feel like, do you often feel like you would feel more comfortable with the other gender and not the one you were assigned at birth? And for that question, I would have answered yes, even 20 years ago. Because that doesn't involve putting a label on yourself. This is just, do you often feel like you would be more comfortable as the other gender than you were assigned at birth? This is a really useful question, I think. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is bathrooms. And this is a very interesting topic, because there is this a lot of discussion going around gender inclusive bathrooms. And one important thing that I want to highlight here is that gender inclusive bathrooms are not for binary trans people, but for non-binary. This is an important distinction because like creating a gender inclusive bathroom for a binary trans person isn't going to help because that's still putting that person into a separate place and discriminating against her. Okay.
Can I stop you here and just to refresh everyone's memory, can you explain the difference again between non-binary and binary transgender people?
Binary trans people are like me, who transition to the other gender completely and have no connection with the gender that they were assigned at birth. Okay. This, although like no one is like that, strictly speaking, because every one of us, even cisgender people who are not trans, have some level of from the other gender emotionally or in behavior or whatever. But like whoever is mostly one gender, that's called a binary trans person or binary cis person, and whoever is somewhere in between is in some aspects male and others female, or just fluctuates between the two. These people are called gender fluid, who basically sometimes are more comfortable as male, sometimes as female, or are just agender, don't identify with either gender. These people are called non-binary trans people. It's a much smaller group, even within the trans community, but they are there. And basically, gender inclusive bathrooms, when we are talking about gender inclusive bathrooms, what it means is that all of your bathrooms, or at least most of your bathrooms, are open for both genders and anyone in between. Okay, so that's gender inclusive bathroom. Having one gender inclusive bathroom in the entire office and making even a binary trans person go there is not as a solution. It's actually more akin to creating colored bathrooms as it was in the US in the 1950s, especially if there is only one in the entire office building, then that would force that person to go that floor over and over again. That's not a solution. So don't do that. Either say that most of your bathrooms are going to be gender inclusive, or just say that what most companies do is basically saying that like the women's bathrooms are just stools, right? It's not like we see each other when we go in there. So what a lot of companies do is just either say that the bathroom without pissoirs is the one that's gender inclusive, and the other one is because people are actually half naked. That's the one that's males only. But of course, there is a lot of criticism from feminists that takes away the women's space while keeping the men's space. So I don't think that's a good solution. I personally think that the best solution is to just have gender inclusive bathrooms and make all of them that, and not have pissoirs, because it's not, or have separate stools for pissoirs. That's also a solution. I have seen that work in a couple of companies. And basically, yeah, one of the companies where I worked, we had a single common place for the sink where you could wash your hands and all that, and then separate stools, and that was the only bathroom, just one bathroom, no gendered bathrooms at all.
Thank you for this. And just to be conscious of time, we have 4 minutes left. So I would like to go around the table and I know it will be difficult to answer, but I would like to give this little exercise for all of us to come up with like the top 3 tips that an employer can do already tomorrow when they would like to support trans and intersex people. And you may have different companies in your mind. So I can imagine, because you know we are talking about a wide range of employers. It can be a small company, it can be a large company who is already pretty developed with their trans inclusive and intersex inclusive efforts, but they can even do more, or it can be somewhere in between maybe. So someone who has just realized that they would like to do more, but they are in the very beginning, but they are a large organization. So when you say your tips, could you please pick one scenario that this tip is for? And maybe we will repeat a little bit each other, but I think that this will provide a diverse enough set of tips for our audience. Yeah, so who would like to start?
I can start. I think I can say or name 2 tips instead of 3. One is to providing safe space for employees and for everyone to talk and to ask, because information is the key. Providing information, because that's the basis of discrimination, prejudice, stigma. So I think, providing a safe space to share information for employees to be able, to accept that people make mistakes. This is taken for granted, that everybody knows everything. So that's one of the basic things I would mention. And the other thing, how to start this inclusive approach is to have an equality or diversity policy statement, or just, whatever you call or however you call it, it's a statement that we are open, and this would include gender identity, gender expression, and stand up for, for the protection of against discrimination and harassment. And that's even for small companies, they could do that. Just a simple statement could have. And for other and much bigger companies, I think it could be required. I mean, it's they could have a policy, they could have a guide, they could have a complete complaint procedure. So that could improve, but a simple statement, I think that's how I would start with. I could go on, but I stop here because I don't want to take the floor from Ivett and Bea.
Bea, would you like to go, and then I can finish?
Yes, some technical issue just popped up in my window, but I hope it was not very loud. Yes, my first tip would be to really start thinking about diversity and inclusion. That's a basic line for many companies, to really decide that this should be surveyed, measured, things should be done to do more for real diversity and inclusion at work, including trans employees. Another one is that all employees should really know and make use of anti-discrimination and anti-harassment policies. And also it's connected to diversity and inclusion, that it should all be communicated, both within companies, whether they are big or small, and to support recruitment. So in the outer communication. And the third one is to attend trainings and to be really able to plan concrete and actual steps, to know where we want to get and what should be done to get there. This is the gist of it.
Okay, so for me, the first one would be make sure that your recruitment process helps trans people in the sense that you avoid outing them to people who they don't want to out to during the process. That's the first step. As far as becoming a trans-friendly employer, I think the 2 things you can do is trainings and even just invite a trans person to talk to your employees. And I'm happy to go to smaller companies or even larger ones to just have a discussion so that they get to know a trans person. Because most people, even though if they know a trans person, they don't know that that person is trans. So just meeting real life, in the flesh trans people, I think that's can help a lot for your employees. And also like employer branding is important, and you can say that you are trans friendly, or even better, you can act in a trans friendly manner. So for example, one of the things that you could do is to think of your processes as a provider. When am I asking for identification? Do I allow people to use a different name from what's their official name? So for example, if you're a rental company, do you force your customers to give you their IDs, for example? Or as a bank, do you allow your customers to identify themselves in any other way but their identification card? I really like these new PayPass credit cards where I don't have to give it to anyone and just push it there, because the bank card has name on it. That's also something that we're thinking about, how you can help trans people to not come out to your employees, or come out to as few of your employees as possible. And the last tip that I can give is, if you have a trans employee, a binary trans employee who is currently unable to change their legal gender, find a way to help her or him leave the country for a country where they can do that. Because frankly, we don't know when it's going to happen in Hungary, or if it's going to happen anytime soon. And these are years, and living like that for years is not an option. And if you think about it, if someone cannot change country within the organization, that also means that they have a choice between leaving you as a company they may actually like, or stay in this legal limbo for years. And I think that's a really important thing, and probably are going to decide to leave the company and leave the country. And if you can make sure that they can leave the country without leaving the company, that's a huge help.
Thank you for all the tips, and thank you for this discussion today. I think it was very insightful, and I'm very happy to see. We asked now the people who were involved in this discussion as participants how they felt about their time, and most of them said that it was a time well spent. So thank you all for this, and I think it's a very important topic to keep talking about. So what we will do, we will send out a follow-up email to all of the participants, and we talked about collecting some good resources, some materials that you can actually look at later on and take inspiration, data and practices from there. So we will share it with you. We will also share it with everyone who signed up for the newsletter of WeAreOpen. So if you haven't done so yet, I would like to grab the opportunity to suggest that you go to our website weareopen.hu, and you can sign up for our newsletter there. Then you will be also notified about the further open backstage discussions. So this is actually a series, and we'll have more coming up. In every open backstage discussion, we focus on a different diversity and inclusion related topic. But we are in the International Pride Month now, so it's not just that we have this discussion now. We are also working on the campaign, the upcoming campaign of WeAreOpen to support LGBTQ inclusion. And the way how we organize campaigns is that we come up with an idea and we share it with all the companies and organizations who have joined WeAreOpen, and you can all come and campaign with us in order to show support to the LGBTQ community in front of the public. So if you are interested in doing something like that, I would like to encourage you again to go go sign up to our newsletter or even join the WeAreOpen community if you haven't done so yet. And we would like to create the space where organizations, companies, and nonprofit organizations alike can join force and stand up together in order to promote diversity and inclusion, openness, and also to show support to LGBTQ people. And without going too much into the details about the upcoming programs, yes, please be aware of the campaign coming up very soon. So the announcement is to be made in a few weeks. And then we will have the further open backstage events. We will collect case studies from employers. So if you already have some good practices that you would like to share, come and revisit WeAreOpen's website in a few weeks, and then you will be able to share the case study, and we will spread this among the employers in Hungary and also beyond. So we hope to be able to create a space where we can get inspiration from each other, and I'm very grateful for all of those insights that you already shared. I hope that many of our listeners will be able to build on this when they create new policies or processes. And last but not least, I would like to say thank you for WeAreOpen's sponsors who make our work possible. So we are sponsored and supported by our co-founders Prezi, Ispel, and Google, and also as gold sponsors Citi, Morgan Stanley, CMS, and Eaton. So we hope to be able to see you again very soon. And well, yes, have a good weekend. Just a day, and I hope to see you all in person sometime later this year. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.